The unexpected resident a journey to nowhere Cassian Vale had stopped believing in fresh starts 3 failures ago. The blueprints that once flowed from his mind like water had dried up completely after his 5th rejected proposal. At 32, he felt ancient. The architectural firm where he once dreamed of creating monuments to human imagination had become a factory for cookie-cutter shopping centers and soulless office parks. When his latest design, a library that incorporated natural light and living plants into every corner, was dismissed as impractical and too expensive, something inside him simply switched off. He withdrew his entire savings, packed a single backpack with essentials, and left the city without telling anyone where he was going. The mountains called to him through an old hiking magazine he found in a waiting room. The Cascade Range, remote and unforgiving, promised exactly what he craved: absolute isolation from the world that had ground down his spirit into dust. The hidden entrance. The hike took 3 days. Cassian followed trails that grew increasingly faint until they disappeared entirely. On the afternoon of the 4th day, as rain began to fall in cold sheets, he stumbled upon something that made him stop in his tracks. Partially concealed by centuries of moss and fallen rock, a cave entrance yawned before him like the mouth of the mountain itself. It was not the small shelter he might have expected. The opening stood easily 20 feet high, though nearly hidden by the angle of the cliff face and thick vegetation. Any casual hiker would pass right by without noticing, but Cassian, trained to see space and structure, recognized immediately that this entrance had been deliberately shaped. The walls were too smooth, the angles too precise to be purely natural. Exhausted and soaked through, he did not hesitate. He ducked inside, grateful for any protection from the storm. The cave swallowed him into darkness that his flashlight barely penetrated, but the temperature inside surprised him with its warmth, dry and almost comfortable despite the frigid rain outside. The air carried a strange scent, like hot metal cooling or distant smoke. The voice in darkness. Cassian ventured deeper, his architect's eye noting how the cave seemed to expand rather than narrow. The walls bore marks that looked almost like tools had carved them, though he could not imagine what tools could work stone with such massive strokes. His footsteps echoed in ways that suggested vast space ahead. He had walked perhaps 200 feet when a sound stopped him cold. It was not wind or dripping water. It was breathing, slow, rhythmic, enormous breathing that made the air itself vibrate with each exhalation. His flashlight beam trembled as he swept it across the cavern, searching for the source. The beam caught something reflective, an eye, not the small gleam of an animal, but an eye larger than his entire head, golden and ancient, watching him with intelligence that sent ice through his veins despite the warm air. "You have found my home," a voice rumbled from the darkness, deep as thunder rolling through mountain valleys. "I wonder if you will flee like the others, or if you possess something they lacked." Cassian's mind tried desperately to process what he was seeing. As his flashlight beam moved, scale after massive scale reflected the light. Bronze and copper colors rippled across a body that seemed to fill the entire rear of the cavern, wings folded against sides. A tail that curved around the perimeter, a head the size of a small car crowned with horns that scraped the ceiling 30 feet above. "Dragon," Cassian whispered, his voice cracking. Not a question, a statement of impossible fact. "Draven," the creature corrected, a note of dry amusement in its volcanic voice. "I have been called Dragon by your kind for millennia, but I prefer my actual name." "And you are?" An arrangement beyond reason. Strangely, Cassian did not run. Perhaps his exhaustion was too complete. Perhaps his disconnection from normal life had already broken something inside him that would have screamed danger. Or perhaps on some level he did not fully understand. He recognized a kindred spirit, another being who had withdrawn from the world. "Cassian," he managed. "I was just looking for shelter from the rain. I did not know anyone lived here." "Lived is not quite accurate," Draven replied, shifting slightly. The movement made the entire cave seem to breathe. "I have existed here for 2,473 of your years. This mountain was wilderness when I arrived. Now your kind builds their structures closer and closer, though none have discovered this particular sanctuary. Until you." Cassian's architect mind was racing. The cave system must extend deep into the mountain. The ventilation alone required to support a creature of this size would need multiple shafts. The heat he felt must come from Draven himself, some internal fire keeping the dragon warm through mountain winters. "I can leave," Cassian offered. though something in him rebelled against the idea. Find somewhere else. The golden eye studied him for a long moment. You fled something, Draven observed. I have lived long enough to recognize the signs. Humans do not venture this far into wilderness simply for adventure anymore. What did your world do to you, Cassian Vale? The use of his full name startled him. How did you know? Your belongings carry labels. I have excellent vision. So what drives you to my doorstep? Cassian found himself talking. About the rejection. About creativity crushed under profit margins. About feeling like a ghost haunting his own life. The words poured out in the darkness while the ancient dragon listened in silence. When he finished, Draven made a sound like rocks grinding together. It took Cassian a moment to realize the dragon was chuckling. Creativity stifled by short-sighted fools. Yes, I understand this well, very well. Here is my proposal, architect. You may shelter here through the storm, perhaps longer if you prove tolerable company. In exchange, I ask only that you do not reveal my existence to your kind. They have grown too numerous and too aggressive for me to risk discovery. Cassian looked into that ancient eye and saw something he had not expected. Loneliness. I accept, he said, flames of understanding morning in the mountain. Cassian woke to golden light filtering through the cave entrance. For a disorienting moment, he forgot where he was. Then memory crashed back with the weight of impossibility. Dragon. He had spent the night in a cave with an actual dragon. He sat up slowly, his body aching from sleeping on stone, and looked deeper into the cavern where darkness still pooled. You are awake, Draven's voice rumbled from the shadows. I wondered if you would wake screaming, convinced the previous night was merely exhaustion-induced madness. I considered it, Cassian admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. But I have never hallucinated before, and this seems too detailed to be a dream. A practical mind. Rare among your kind. The dragon shifted, and in the growing daylight, Cassian could see more of Draven's form. The scales were not uniform bronze, but layered in shades from deep copper to bright gold, creating patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The wings, folded tight against the massive body, showed membranes of dark amber, translucent when light passed through them. Cassian stood, brushing dust from his clothes. May I ask you something? You may ask. I reserve the right to decline answering. Why did you let me stay? You could have driven me away or worse. Draven's head tilted slightly, a strangely human gesture. Curiosity, perhaps. You did not react as most humans do. No terror, no greed when you saw me. Only weariness and a strange acceptance. I found it intriguing. The horde of memories over the following days, an unexpected rhythm developed. Cassian would venture out in the mornings, exploring the surrounding forest, gathering water from a nearby stream, and finding edible plants. He discovered a small clearing where wild berries grew in abundance. In the afternoons and evenings, he would return to the cave and talk with Draven. The dragon proved surprisingly willing to share stories. On the 5th day, Draven invited Cassian deeper into the cave system, past the main chamber into galleries that branched like veins through the mountain. Cassian's flashlight revealed chambers filled with objects that made his breath catch. Your kind calls it a hoard, Draven explained, his voice echoing through the stone corridors. But it is more accurately a museum. Each item here represents a moment in human history that I found noteworthy. Cassian moved among the artifacts like a man in a trance. Weapons from eras he could barely identify. Pottery that might have come from ancient civilizations. Books preserved in conditions that should have destroyed them centuries ago. Jewelry, coins, paintings, sculptures. Every item was placed with care. Not piled carelessly, but arranged as if in exhibition. This sword, Cassian said, stopping before a blade that gleamed despite its obvious age. The craftsmanship is incredible. Forged in 1156 by a smith named Thomas the Red, Draven said, moving closer. His massive presence behind Cassian should have been terrifying, but somehow felt protective. He was the finest weaponsmith in England, though his name is lost to your histories. I watched him work for 3 months, fascinated by the precision. When raiders killed him and burned his workshop, I took his masterwork to preserve it. Cassian turned to look at the dragon. You save things. Pieces of human achievement. Someone should, Draven replied softly. Your kind creates wonders, then destroys them in wars and carelessness. I cannot save everything, but what I can preserve I do. Shared isolation. As weeks passed, Cassian found himself settling into life in the cave with surprising ease. He created a small living space near the entrance where daylight reached, using materials he found in the forest. Draven watched with interest as Cassian built a simple shelter within the larger shelter, his architectural training evident in the efficient design. "You have skill with structures," Draven observed one afternoon, "yet you speak of it as if it brought you only pain." Cassian paused in his work, hammer in hand. "I loved it once, creating spaces where people could live and gather and feel something beyond just walls and roof. But the world wanted boxes, profitable boxes that looked like every other box. My designs were called impractical." "Impractical," Draven repeated, a growl underlying the word. "A label applied by those who lack imagination to those who possess it. I have seen this pattern repeat across your entire history." "Did dragons build things?" Cassian asked, genuine curiosity overcoming his melancholy. "We shaped the world differently. Where humans build upon the land, we carved into it. The mountain itself is my architecture. These caves are not natural, Cassian. I created them slowly over centuries. Each chamber serves a purpose. Air flows through channels I designed to carry warmth or coolness depending on the season. The galleries protect my collection while the main chamber provides living space. It is structure without the need to dominate the landscape." Cassian looked around with new eyes. He had assumed the caves were natural, but now examining the walls more carefully, he could see the subtle craft, the angles that promoted airflow, the way sound carried or was dampened depending on the chamber, the drainage channels that kept the caves dry. "This is brilliant," he breathed, "working with the mountain instead of against it." "Perhaps," Draven said, and Cassian detected pleasure in the dragon's tone. "Your impractical designs were simply ahead of their time. Or perhaps your kind has lost sight of what architecture should be." The gift of fire one cold evening, as autumn deepened toward winter, Cassian struggled to start a fire near his shelter. The wood was slightly damp from recent rain, and his matches kept failing. He cursed quietly, blowing on the reluctant sparks. "Move aside," Draven's voice came from behind him. Cassian stepped back quickly. The dragon's head extended from the darkness, and Cassian noticed for the first time the elegant structure of the skull, all-purpose and deadly beauty. Draven's mouth opened slightly, and a thin stream of flame, controlled and precise, touched the kindling. The fire caught immediately, burning strong and warm. "Thank you," Cassian said, staring at the flames. "A small service." Draven withdrew but did not retreat entirely into shadow. "Tell me, architect, if you could build anything, unrestricted by budgets or committees or fearful clients, what would you create?" Cassian sat by the fire thinking. "A library," he said finally, "but not like any that exists. I would build it into a hillside with rooms that followed the natural contours. Glass walls looking into forests. Reading spaces that felt like nests or caves, intimate and protected. Water features carrying sound through the building. Places where people could lose themselves in books while never losing connection to the natural world around them." "Why did you not build this?" "Because it would be expensive. Because glass is impractical. Because maintenance would be complicated. Because it did not fit the template." Cassian's voice grew bitter. "Because I was told that buildings should be about function, not feeling." "Function without feeling is meaningless," Draven said firmly. "Even I, who have lived alone for centuries, understand this. My caves serve functions, yes, but they also provide beauty, peace, sanctuary. These things matter. Perhaps more than your kind currently remembers." Cassian stared into the fire, feeling something shift inside him. For the first time since arriving at the mountain, he felt not just the absence of pain but the presence of possibility. Here in a cave with a dragon, he had found understanding that the human world had refused to offer. "Draven," he said quietly, "thank you for not eating me when I stumbled in here." The dragon made that grinding rock sound that passed for laughter. "Thank you for being interesting enough to spare. Now sleep, Cassian Vale. Tomorrow I will show you the Eastern Galleries. There are structures there from civilizations your historians have forgotten entirely. Perhaps they will inspire your impractical imagination." As Cassian settled into his bedroll, warm from the fire and from something deeper, he realized he had not thought about his failed career for days. The cave felt more like home than any apartment he had ever rented, and the dragon felt more like a friend than most humans he had known. Wings against the storm. The sound of intrusion. Cassian woke to Draven's low growl vibrating through the cave. It was still dark, hours before dawn, and the sound carried a warning that made his heart race. He sat up quickly, reaching for his flashlight. "Stay quiet," Dreven's voice came as barely more than a whisper, though even whispered it filled the space. There are humans on the mountain. Many of them. Moving with purpose, Cassian's blood ran cold. In the 6 weeks since he had found the cave, he had seen no other people. The isolation had been complete. How many? 8, perhaps 10. They carry equipment, lights. They are searching for something. Cassian moved quietly to the cave entrance, staying in shadow. Far below, through the trees, he could see bobbing flashlight beams. Even at this distance, he could hear voices carried on the night wind. His stomach knotted as understanding hit him. Surveyors, he said grimly. Or developers. Someone must have bought this land. Bought, Draven repeated, the word dripping with contempt. As if the mountain can be owned. Cassian watched the lights moving in a pattern, a grid search. They were mapping the area, probably for logging or construction. And if they were thorough, they would eventually find the cave entrance. Find Draven. You need to hide, Cassian said urgently. Deeper in the caves. I will go down and try to redirect them, tell them this area is unstable or something. No. Draven's response was firm. If you reveal yourself, they will wonder why you are here. They will investigate more thoroughly, not less. And I am finished hiding. Cassian turned to stare into the darkness where the dragon's eyes gleamed. Finished hiding? Draven, if they find you, they will bring armies. Scientists, the media. Your sanctuary will be destroyed. Perhaps, the dragon said softly. Or perhaps it is time your kind remembered that they are not the only intelligence on this world. That their expansion cannot continue without consequence. The choice. The next hours passed in agonizing tension. Cassian and Draven watched as the survey team moved methodically up the mountain. They took measurements, marked trees, and made notes on tablets. Professional, thorough, inevitably approaching the hidden cave entrance. There is another option, Cassian said suddenly. Let me go down there. I will tell them I am a researcher, that this area contains endangered species. I can file reports, create bureaucratic delays. It might buy time. Time for what? Draven asked. For me to flee to some other mountain that your kind will eventually claim? I am tired, Cassian. 2,000 years of hiding. Watching, collecting fragments while your civilization consumes everything in its path. Where does it end? It ends when they kill you, Cassian said bluntly. Because they will. You know they will. Humanity does not react well to things it cannot control. Then perhaps it is time humanity learned it cannot control everything. Cassian heard the finality in Draven's voice and made a decision. He grabbed his backpack, stuffing it with essentials. Then I am going down there to warn them off. Buy you at least a few days to decide what you really want to do. Why? Draven's head emerged from the shadows, bringing his face level with Cassian's. The golden eyes were luminous in the pre-dawn darkness. Why would you risk yourself for me? We have known each other mere weeks. Cassian met the dragon's gaze without flinching. Because you are the first being, human or otherwise, who has understood what I was trying to create. Because you preserve beauty while my own species destroys it. Because this cave is more of a home than anywhere I have ever lived. And because you are my friend. The word hung in the air between them. Friend. A human and a dragon. Impossible and absolutely true. The storm breaks Cassian descended the mountain as dawn broke, scrambling down paths he had learned over the past weeks. He intercepted the survey team near a clearing, stepping out of the forest as if he had been hiking innocently. Morning, he called out, trying to sound casual. Bit early for a hike, is not it? The team leader, a woman in her 40s wearing expensive outdoor gear, looked startled. Who are you? This is private property. Cassian Vale, independent wildlife researcher. I have been studying the endemic species in this area for the past 2 months. The lies came smoothly, built from truth. I need to ask you to avoid the upper slopes. There is an extremely rare population of spotted salamanders breeding in the cave systems up there. Disturbing them would be a violation of federal protection laws. The woman frowned, pulling out her tablet. We were not informed of any protected species in this survey zone. That is because the designation is still pending. But I can assure you, any development that disturbs those caves will face legal challenges that will tie up your project for years. Cassian pulled out his phone, showing her photos he had taken of the forest, trying to look official. I have been documenting everything. Locations, populations, breeding patterns. One of the younger surveyors spoke up. Mike, I am getting weird readings up ahead. The ground temperature is showing hotspots that do not make sense for this elevation. Cassian's heart hammered. Draven's heat signature. They were close enough to detect it. The team leader checked her equipment, frowning deeper. That is odd. Geothermal activity? We were not briefed about that either. Exactly why this area needs more study before any development, Cassian said quickly. Look, I do not want to be difficult, but I have 6 weeks of research invested here. Give me a few days to file my findings with the appropriate agencies. If they clear you, then fine. But if you push forward now and it turns out this area is protected, it will cost your company millions. The woman studied him, clearly weighing options. Cassian could see her calculating, delay now or risk massive legal fees later. Finally, she nodded. 3 days. We will inform the development company that the site requires additional environmental review, but this better be legitimate. It is, Cassian lied, shaking her hand. Thank you, really. A new understanding. Cassian climbed back to the cave as the survey team retreated down the mountain. His hands were shaking from adrenaline. He had bought time, nothing more. Maybe a week if he was lucky. The development company would send their own researchers to verify his claims, and they would find nothing but empty forest and a cave containing something far more precious and dangerous than salamanders. Draven was waiting at the cave entrance, fully visible in the morning light. Seeing the dragon outside the shadows for the first time stole Cassian's breath. Bronze and gold scales caught the sun, making Draven look like a living sculpture. The wings, partially extended, were massive and beautiful. You protected me, Draven said simply. I bought time, Cassian corrected, collapsing against the cave wall. A few days at most. Draven, you have to decide. Hide or run, or I do not know what other options there are. The dragon was silent for a long moment, looking out over the valley below where human civilization spread like a patchwork quilt. There is a third option. One I have avoided for centuries out of fear and habit. What option? Revelation. Draven turned those ancient eyes back to Cassian. Allow myself to be known. Not as a monster or a myth, but as a thinking being with rights to exist. Your kind has some who fight for the preservation of species, do they not? For wild spaces? Yes, but Draven, you are not just a species. You are intelligent. That changes everything. They will want to study you, confine you, use you. Perhaps. Or perhaps there are humans like you who would understand, who would fight not just for my survival, but for my right to remain free. Draven lowered his head level with Cassian. You gave up everything to escape your world. Would you give up your anonymity to save mine? Cassian understood what the dragon was asking. Make the cave and its inhabitant public. Bring scientists, conservationists, media. Use Cassian's own story, his credentials as an architect and educated person to give credibility. Transform Draven from a secret into a cause. It was terrifying. It would expose Cassian to the world he had fled. But it might also be the only way to create protection strong enough to matter. If we do this, Cassian said slowly, we do it carefully. We control the narrative from the start. I have contacts, people I used to work with who believed in conservation, journalists who care about more than sensationalism. We would need to be strategic. We, Draven repeated, and Cassian heard the weight the dragon placed on that word. You would do this with me, not just for me. Someone has to make sure you do not accidentally eat a reporter, Cassian said, finding a shaky smile. Besides, you were right. I came here to hide from a world that stifled creativity and vision. But maybe the answer is not to hide. Maybe it is to show that world something so undeniably wondrous that it has to change how it thinks. Draven's expression, insofar as a dragon could express emotion on such an alien face, showed something like hope. An architect who builds with living stone. A dragon who preserves human achievement. Perhaps together we can create something neither of our kinds has managed alone. A partnership between species, Cassian said. That would be impractical, difficult, probably impossible. Exactly your kind of project, then. Cassian laughed, the sound echoing through the cave. 3 months ago, he had abandoned everything to escape the world. Now he was preparing to re-engage with it in the most dramatic way possible. But this time he would not be alone. This time, he had a friend who understood what it meant to create something beautiful in a world that often forgot to value beauty. 3 days, Cassian said, pulling out his phone. We have 3 days to plan how to introduce the world to its last dragon. We better make it count. As dawn light filled the cave, human and dragon began planning not an escape but a revelation. It would be risky, chaotic, and would change both their lives irrevocably. But standing together at the cave entrance, looking out at a world that would soon know dragons still existed, both felt something neither had experienced in years: hope, purpose, and the thrilling terror of stepping forward instead of hiding away. The mountain would remain a sanctuary, but no longer a secret, and in that transformation, both dragon and human would find not isolation but connection to something larger than themselves.